At exactly 4:32 a.m., the doorbell rang like a warning shot. I jolted upright, heart pounding, the house wrapped in the kind of silence that only exists before dawn. Through the peephole, I saw two men in reflective vests standing stiffly at my front door, clipboards in hand, radios clipped to their shoulders, and eyes that didn't blink. I cracked the door open just a little. One of them stepped forward and said it clear as day, "We're with the HOA. We need access to your backyard immediately." That sentence didn't just wake me up, it tore a hole through any sense of normal I had left. This wasn't some apartment complex with a doorman or a gated retirement community. This was my quiet, tree-lined neighborhood where folks waved from porches and argued politely about fence heights during HOA meetings. Sure, they'd been strict about lawn edges and holiday lights, but nothing like this. This wasn't a warning letter or a fine, this was a 4:32 a.m. intrusion. And when I asked them why, they didn't hesitate. "The backyard is technically part of the HOA's warehouse now," the taller man said, like that made perfect sense. "Warehouse? My yard?" I stared at him, thinking maybe I'd misheard. Was this a prank? A glitch? Some kind of legal trick buried in the fine print of the HOA agreement I'd signed years ago without a second thought? I tried to ask questions, but the men only repeated the same line, "It's in the new amendment." Section 4B. I hadn't received any new amendment. I hadn't even been awake long enough to think, let alone process the idea that my own backyard, my rose bushes, my dog's favorite patch of grass, the swing set I built with my father, had somehow been reclassified as warehouse space. And then they did something that shook me even more. They turned, walked right past me, and without permission, they headed around the side of the house. I was frozen in the doorway. The air was cold and electric. Somewhere behind me, my dog started to growl. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just some clerical error. This was planned, coordinated, and I had no idea just how far they were willing to go. I ran barefoot to the back door, barely stopping to grab my phone. My porch light flickered on as the HOA men stepped into my yard like they owned it. They moved with unsettling confidence, scanning the ground with flashlights, pointing to spots like surveyors charting territory. My dog, Bailey, barked furiously behind the sliding glass door. I'd never seen her react that way. Ears back, tail stiff, like she sensed something wasn't right. "Hey, you can't just walk into my yard," I shouted through the screen. One of them turned slightly. "We're authorized," he said flatly. "Check your email." But I scrolled through every HOA newsletter and update over the last 3 months. Nothing about a warehouse. No special vote or zoning change. Just the usual stuff, paint color restrictions, trash bin violations, and those constant reminders about power washing driveways. I've lived here 7 years. Bought this house after my divorce, wanting a fresh start, a place that felt like mine. I've paid every due, attended every meeting, and even chaired the landscaping committee for a year. I wasn't just a resident, I was part of the community. But tonight, something had shifted. This wasn't about rules anymore. It felt personal. My mind raced back to last month's HOA meeting. There was a strange agenda item listed vaguely as Q3 Property Expansion Review. Most of us thought it had to do with a new tennis court. I remembered a man I didn't recognize speaking up briefly. He wore a suit, didn't introduce himself, and asked a strange question: "Are there any non-utility parcels along the perimeter we could reclassify for limited use zoning?" We laughed it off. Now it didn't feel funny. I stepped outside, the cold grass numbing my feet. "If you don't leave now, I'm calling the police." The shorter man glanced at his watch. "You're free to call," he said without fear. "But by the time they get here, we'll be done mapping phase 1. Mapping what? That's when I noticed the strange orange markers sticking up from my lawn, tiny flags like you'd see before digging a trench or laying pipes. But I never approved any construction. And no permits were posted. Suddenly, a thought hit me: what if this wasn't just about my yard? What if other homes were being targeted too while everyone slept? Bailey barked louder as I fumbled with my phone to start recording. But something told me this was bigger than just a recording. This was a fight I hadn't seen coming. Bailey's barking was growing frantic now, claws scraping against the glass like she wanted to rip through it. I pressed record on my phone, zooming in on the orange flags scattered across my backyard like landmines. The HOA men didn't flinch. They just kept moving, scribbling on their clipboards, checking the map they refused to let me see. Then headlights flickered at the edge of the street. A silver SUV idled in front of my neighbor Lisa's house. No one got out. But I could see the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat, watching. Not moving. Just watching. Lisa. Maybe she'd seen this too. I texted her quickly. Me, are you awake? HOA is in my yard. They said it's now part of a warehouse? Please check outside. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response. I remembered Lisa had been quiet at the last few HOA meetings, unusually quiet for someone who used to rally the neighborhood against even minor rule changes. Last time we spoke, she seemed tense, distracted, like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Was she scared? I took a shaky breath and turned back toward the backyard. The men were now examining the old shed in the corner. My dad built that with his own hands after my divorce. I still kept his old tools in there, even though I rarely used them. One of the men tested the door. Locked. He made a note. That pushed me too far. I stormed across the lawn, ignoring the wet grass and cold wind, and got right up in their faces. You don't have a warrant. You don't have permission. You're trespassing. I want names, I want papers, and I want you off my property now. The taller one didn't blink. You signed the HOA charter. Page 42. Subsection H grants emergency reassignment rights to common-use zoning parcels in the event of operational demand. That clause was for power outages and snowplows, not turning my yard into a goddamn warehouse. I snapped. But then came the twist that made my blood run cold. We're not building a warehouse, he said slowly. It is a warehouse. You just didn't know it yet. And before I could respond, he pulled something out of his vest pocket. A laminated photo, my shed, lit from inside. Taken at night. I'd never seen it lit at night. I never left the light on. You should ask your neighbor what she's been storing in there, he said. I froze. My gaze drifted to Lisa's dark windows just as her porch light flicked off. In that moment, something cracked open inside me, not just fear, but betrayal. Someone was hiding something. Someone close. And I wasn't just defending a yard anymore, I was defending my entire reality. The shed door creaked open. Not by me. The shorter HOA man had a bolt cutter in his hand, its jaws still glinting from the lock he just snapped. I didn't even hear it break, maybe because of the ringing in my ears, or maybe because my brain couldn't keep up with what was happening. You can't do this. I shouted, stepping forward, phone camera still recording. This is illegal. I'll press charges, trespassing, destruction of property, harassment. He turned calmly. You're free to try. But this area is no longer under your individual jurisdiction. It's an active shared use space, reclassified last week by emergency board vote. Due process was followed. What board vote? I demanded. There wasn't even a meeting. There was, the tall one said. Private session. Emergency quorum. You and several others were left off the notice list for safety reasons. My throat tightened. Safety reasons? The shed's wooden door swung all the way open now. A dim orange glow spilled out from within. It wasn't from my single bare bulb overhead. No, this was something else entirely. A humming sound came with it. Low, electric. Industrial. What the hell? I stepped closer, squinting inside. Shelves. Stacks of black containers with barcode labels. A strange, boxy machine in the corner, blinking softly with blue lights. I didn't put any of it there. I'd never seen it before in my life. But someone had. And right then, I knew Lisa wasn't just a bystander. She was involved. Maybe not alone, but she knew. I backed up fast, almost tripping over one of their orange markers. I'm calling the police, I said, voice shaking but loud. And Channel 6. And every damn lawyer I can find. The tall man didn't even flinch. Do what you need to do. But by then, the inventory will be moved. Inventory? Like this was a shipping depot. Or worse. Suddenly, the silver SUV's headlights clicked off. The engine started. It backed slowly out of Lisa's driveway and rolled toward my house. I couldn't see who was inside, just that same silhouette unmoving behind the wheel. The HOA men turned toward the road as if expecting it. Is that her? I asked. Neither of them answered. The SUV stopped in front of my house. Then the driver's side door opened. Out stepped Lisa, wearing a heavy coat. No expression. Just that same distant calm she'd worn at the last meeting. She looked at me for a moment, then said quietly, "You shouldn't have opened the shed." Lisa's cold eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, everything stood still, the cold night air, the quiet street, the distant hum from the mysterious crates inside the shed. Then, without a word, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. She tossed it onto the porch steps between us. I picked it up with trembling hands. The HOA men stepped back, watching silently like spectators in a game I didn't know I was playing. I ripped open the envelope. Inside were copies of emails, meeting minutes, and legal documents, proof that the entire emergency warehouse plan wasn't about the HOA at all. It was a front, a cover for something else entirely. Something bigger and darker. One email stood out, sent by the HOA president to a private investment group, property consolidation complete. Next phase, covert storage for proprietary research. All resident concerns must be minimized. My heart hammered. Proprietary research? In my backyard? The shed? And the documents revealed that Lisa had been on the inside all along, a liaison between the HOA board and this shadowy group. I looked up at Lisa, who finally spoke, her voice calm but grave. "I didn't want you to find out like this. But they're watching. They've been watching all of us." The HOA agents exchanged a glance but remained silent. Their faces were unreadable masks. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop digging, or you'll regret it." Fear clamped down on me, but so did resolve. I wasn't about to be pushed out or silenced. Not when my home was at stake. Lisa took a step back, glancing nervously toward the street. "You need to decide, fight this or disappear quietly. They control a lot more than just the HOA." I clenched my fists. The betrayal stung, not just from Lisa but from the entire system I thought I trusted. My neighbors, my community, even the rules I lived by, all twisted into something unrecognizable. I realized then this was more than a property dispute. This was about power, control, the right to privacy, and I was trapped in the middle. The silver SUV's engine revved suddenly. Lisa's eyes flicked toward it again. "They're ready to move the inventory tonight. If you don't act fast, this will be over before anyone knows what happened." I glanced at the shed one last time, then back at Lisa, at the HOA men, at my quiet street now cloaked in shadows. This fight wasn't just for my yard anymore. It was for truth and maybe even my life. I stood frozen for a moment, the envelope's weight suddenly heavier in my hands. The truth was out, but so was the danger. The silver SUV's engine rumbled louder, tires crunching on gravel, signaling the final countdown. Lisa's warning echoed in my mind. "They're ready to move the inventory tonight." I had to act. Fast. "Wait," I said, voice steady but firm. "If you want this gone, if this secret's so important, then prove it. Let me record your names. Let me call someone who can hold you accountable." The two HOA men exchanged a glance. Then one nodded slowly. The tension was thick, but beneath it, I sensed hesitation. Before I could push further, my phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. "One last chance. Back off." I raised my phone high, shining the screen toward the men and Lisa. "You want to silence me? Watch this." Suddenly, headlights flooded the yard from the street. Several black SUVs rolled in, their windows tinted, engines idling menacingly. Men in suits stepped out, faces unreadable, moving with purpose. Lisa's calm cracked for the first time. "You don't know what you're dealing with," she whispered. But I wasn't backing down. The suited men approached, and the HOA agents fell back, almost relieved. The leader of the group pulled out a badge, a federal seal. "Special Investigations Unit," he announced. "We've been tracking illegal research activities linked to this property and others in the area." Shock crashed over me. The shed, the crates, the warehouse wasn't just an HOA scheme. It was part of something far bigger, illegal experiments, covert operations. I looked at Lisa, who no longer met my eyes. She was caught in the middle, a pawn and a player. The federal agents began securing the shed, confiscating crates and equipment. One approached me and said, "We've been trying to protect residents like you, but things went sideways. You did the right thing calling attention to this." Relief washed over me, but so did exhaustion. The betrayal, the fear, the fight. It had all been worth it. As the agents packed up, Lisa was quietly taken aside, her role to be investigated. But just when I thought it was over, my phone buzzed one last time. A new message. "They're watching still. Trust no one." This isn't finished. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. The shadows around my neighborhood hadn't lifted, they'd only grown deeper. The neighborhood felt different in the days that followed, quiet but unsettled. The street where I'd once felt safe now held an invisible weight, a reminder that sometimes even the most familiar places can hide secrets. The federal agents had taken over the investigation, and while the shed was finally empty, the questions lingered like stubborn shadows. Lisa was gone, facing legal consequences for her involvement. I couldn't deny the sting of betrayal, but I also couldn't ignore the complexity of her situation. She wasn't a villain in black and white, she was someone caught between loyalty and fear, just like me. Neighbors started talking again, but this time with cautious whispers instead of casual greetings. Some thanked me for standing up, others looked away. The HOA, stripped of its power in our community, began to reorganize, hopefully for the better. Through it all, Bailey was my anchor. Her wagging tail and quiet companionship reminded me what this fight was really about, not just property lines or shady deals, but the home we build and protect. I learned that vigilance matters, that the things we sign off on, the small print we ignore, can change our lives in ways we never expect. But more than that, I learned that standing up, even when it's terrifying, is the first step toward reclaiming control. If there's one thing I want you to take away from this story, it's this: never let fear silence you. Whether it's a late-night intrusion or a creeping injustice, your voice matters. Your home, your community, your truth, they're worth defending. Because sometimes the fight for what's right starts in your own backyard.